I'm late. Okay, so can you give me an overview of how and why the Alex was founded?
Sure. So about 52 years ago, there was a doctor, a nurse, and a social worker who were living in Inglewood, and they thought that if they worked together better, they could probably deliver better care for vulnerable persons.
Yeah.
And so they literally started in the basement of somebody's house and started working together, blending social services with health together. And from that, over the past 52 years, we have grown and evolved. We're now one of we are Canada's largest community health center. And so I had the great privilege of touring Patrick around this afternoon. And so we are that blend of healthcare and social services. We have 68 doctors that work for us. We started with one and now we have 68. We have specialist physicians who work for us. We have people who, like doctors who do internal medicine, OBGYN, that's delivering babies, dermatology, which is skin, and we have psychiatry here. And so in addition to that, we have teams of staff that support those doctors. And so what I'd explain to you when you first came in the door is we are a one-stop shop. So we provide everything here. So we have a community kitchen out front, we have a lab on site, we have a pharmacy on site, we have mental health clinicians on site, and if you've got issues with mental health or addictions, we're here to serve.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, why was founded?
Yeah, I will tell you. And because we just did Art Smith Awards last week that your dad was at, so you can talk to him. So
Okay.
Calgary Homeless started 27 years ago, and it was an interesting time. It was started by a businessman named Art Smith, who was driving home from his office and listening to QR77, and they were talking about the homelessness that seemed to be increasing in Calgary. And he himself was noticing people experiencing homelessness on the streets. And he phoned into QR77 to get more information. And then he thought, he was like a big guy in the oil industry, I believe. He thought, I'm going to do something about this.
Yeah.
So at the time, he mentored the current mayor, Ralph Klein.
Really?
Or the mayor at the time, not the current mayor, the mayor at the time, which is always helpful. And he, as a Calgary businessman, he had a lot of influence, Patrick. So what he ended up doing, he would phone other really influential business leaders and say, we have a problem. And they would say, I don't see any people who are homeless. So he would take them on night tours. So he would drive them around at night to show them.
Well,
And because one of the interesting things is once people see something, they can't unsee it. So he gathered a willing coalition of business leaders who said, we got to do something about that. He happened to have a really good connection with the mayor of Calgary at the time, who happened to have a really good relationship with the premier, Ed Stelmach, at the time. And then they partnered with the nonprofit community to create this incredible innovative approach, which was all those players, the business community, nonprofit community, and politicians in a room to say, how do we have a unified fight against homelessness? And that's how Calgary Homeless began. And what's interesting, this model, we're called a community-based organization, or CBO. There's 7 of them in Alberta at this point in time. Yeah.
okay.
So that's how it started. And I came in 5 years ago, and it's morphed over time, but the original intent of Art Smith has never changed, which is that it is only through working in partnership and collaboration will we be able to face such a complicated challenge of people experiencing homelessness. It's not a simple solution, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really long answer to a question, of course, but that's okay. Why it was started was because God gave us a calling to be able to reach out to the poor of the community.
Yeah.
And I believe it was an opportunity for us to be able to share the love of Christ in the community. But it was, I think it goes way deeper than that. The church itself was kind of reaching into and giving some food or giving some clothing, but the community itself, as far as the street community itself, was not really being welcomed into the church. Back when the Mustard Seed started, it wasn't that. It was like us and them, right? So here we are. We got a situation where we have these beautiful churches, and we know we have to care for the poor, but we give them some things, but they're not really welcome or to be really a part of who we are. Mm-hmm. And I believe the church was finally giving themselves a bit of a shake on that. And First Baptist Church downtown said this isn't going to work, and they started to think about how they could go deeper in how to reach out and actually allow those people who have found themselves in poverty and homelessness and those types of situations to actually participate and be a part, an equal part, because that's what Jesus would intend. And so I was running a little place called the Burning Bush Coffee House in the basement of First Baptist Church, where we would welcome in street people at night, and they would come in and we'd have bands playing and so forth. But at the end of the day, we kind of say, be warm, be filled, and on thy merry way. And off they would go, and then we'd head back to our own homes. And we wanted to do something more full time, and that said that we wanted to walk side by side with people in the long term. And so they came up with the idea of the Mustard Seed, looking at a place in Victoria, which had a thing called the Mustard Seed Street Church. And so we said, well, why can't we start a Mustard Seed Street Church here? And that was pretty exciting to do. So it became a church of street people, for street people, run by ex-street people, which I'm one, someone who's come off the streets himself. And so here we are actually having our own church, but it's filled with people who come off the streets, and they become members, participants. They're preaching on Sunday. They're doing Bible studies. They're actually learning how to develop as part of the body of Christ. We're seeing a lot of people come to Christ. It's a wonderful thing that's happening down there. It's getting full and packed, and that's lovely. But God put upon my heart to say, what's happening with the rest of my body, but rest of the church? How are they viewing this organization called the Mustard Seed? And what they were doing is viewing it as, you're the church to the street people. We are the church to everybody else, and we're happy with that. And really, we were doing the same thing why we started in the first place. We were actually separating people, and that's not God's intent. Is for us to be separated. It's for us to be one, and to walk together in love, and to respect the giftedness He gives to all people. And so I felt it needed to change. Yeah. And the board of directors and all the people involved said, let's do this. And we became a ministry of the churches. And we said to the churches, you have a responsibility. It's not just a few people's responsibility to reach out to those who are marginalized, underprivileged, or facing many different types of challenges. It's a responsibility of all of us. And we all need to kind of reach out and make a difference. And so we became a ministry of the churches. And we started to see, how can we actually mobilize the church all throughout our community, all throughout Alberta even. I mean, it ended up being quite wide and big. Yeah. And get them to actually participate within the life of the body of Christ, with the people who are on the streets. And they did. They went and they took up the torch and said, let's do that. And Mustard Seed became the vehicle through which many hundreds of churches throughout Alberta actually started to actually participate in the care of the underprivileged of our community.
Supporting most here and vulnerable people, and why do you think that work is so important?
So a little bit about me. We moved over here from England when I was a young girl. I was 12 years old, and tragically my mom died shortly after I got here, and the Calgary community, the church community, wrapped their arms around me and supported me and my family. And so when I was about 15, so about 3 years later, I knew that my calling was to help people. And so every job I've ever done was about helping people. And I spent 18 years working for McMahon. I worked in foster care, in-home support. I was a youth worker. I worked in group care. I ran programs, and then I went on the school board. And then when I was approached to come work here as the CEO, I knew it was my calling. I felt that I'd come back home, and I felt that this is exactly where I was meant to be. And I love the fact that we blend healthcare and social services. and do the integration and do the whole person. We don't just do one thing, and I love that about us. And I love the fact that when people walk through this door, whatever they need, there's somebody on our team that can help them with that.
Why would you say you got involved in this kind
Why
of
did I
work?
get involved?
Well,
I have
and
to
why
be
do you think
careful.
it's important?
So I'll tell you why I was interested in the job. I actually worked 27 years at Catholic Family Service. So we did prevention, early intervention, counseling. And one of the programs we operated with the Calgary Board of Education, was the Louise Dean Center for Pregnant and Parenting Students. Have you heard of it?
No,
And you might not. So what it is, it's a Calgary Board of Education school, like Bishop Carroll, which is, Bishop Carroll is known for their individual study with high performing students. Louise Dean, the only students happen to be teenage young mothers.
Right.
So the school would provide the teaching, we would provide the social work services. So social workers, dietitians, we had an on-site daycare. Like honestly, Patrick, a wraparound service where the young women did so well when they came into the school. 100% of them, or 99, graduated high school. Many of them got into university. And then 20% of them were homeless. Catholic Family did not offer services for those experiencing homelessness. And I'll be frank with you, I didn't even understand how to manage that. So they would have to go to a different organization and get that service. So they would be okay within the walls of our school, and we thought we were doing this great job, but they would leave and be going to a shelter, or I call it stroller surfing, sleeping on someone's couch, or living in a hotel, or with somebody who was unsafe. And I thought, this isn't great service. We need to figure out a way to ensure all the services are connected. And Calgary Homeless Foundation, when you're in this role, you have some influence over how that can happen. So I thought I could have influence over that young woman not having to go to 3 different places to get services in her community. So that's how I got involved.
For me personally, I came to Christ after coming off the streets, and at some point I started to actually really dig deeper and understand what the Word of God was challenging me to do. And one of the things it challenged me to do is not just to talk about what I believe, but actually participate in what I believe. And so God's called me on a journey to be able to express Him to work through my life and shine through my life. And it just so happened in this environment, with street people, if you want to say that, with those who are facing challenges, I was actually most at home, and I felt really a place that I could express the love of Christ and receive it too, and be part of the body life within that area. And so I started to volunteer at a place called the Burning Bush Coffee House, and raising my little family, volunteering at this place called the Burning Bush, and they eventually, it is that organization that led into the Mustard Seed. They asked me at one point if I would take over the leadership of that coffee house, and then I led the process of moving into Mustard Seed.
What would you look for in your staff or volunteers, and what motives or values might you find a bit aligned?
The biggest thing for us is finding staff where their values align with our values. So in terms of our values, one of the values that we hold near and dear is that you must have grit, which seems like an odd value for an organization to have.
Yeah.
But the reason why we chose that is because the folks that walk through our doors, they've got grit. They're spending their days on street or in shelter, and it is incredibly difficult for them to wake up every day and to go about their day. Well, we need our staff to have the same, right? They need to have grit as well. They hear very challenging stories, people who lived homeless, have been abused, have had addictions issues. And so that needs to marry it. Like, it needs to be the perfect blend of clients having grit and staff having grit. I think the other thing that's really important to us is we have to care deeply.
Yeah.
So we have to be non-judgmental of anybody who walks through that door. Because I always remember what my dad said to me is, there by the grace of God go I, right? Meaning that I feel very blessed and privileged that I get to be the CEO of this organization. Other people have had different journeys and don't get that, and so it's wrong for me to judge. So when you ask me who doesn't fit here, it's people who judge. And so our staff knows, and Patrick was great because he met all of our staff at the front door. But if I have to work with a funder or a donor or somebody who's going to do business with us here, Patrick, if they walk in the door and they look down at our clients and don't accept our clients, then they don't get the privilege of working here and working with us.
Why we do it, because we believe we are so positioned to guide the fight against homelessness. So we can be that guide that governments come to, communities come to, service providers to say, what is the best way forward? Because we got no skin in the game. We don't get paid. Like, there's no competition. Like, we're neutral. Why, again, I would say to your Uncle Jason, why Calgary Homeless should exist is, number one, we know the local context of Calgary. Number two, we take a very reasonable 10% admin. Number three, we can pivot really fast in ways governments can't do. Number four, we can leverage philanthropic funds. And number five, we can be a buffer. So if we have to make a tough decision, like let's say, for example, because you know the mustard seed, we have to cut the mustard seed, but the CEO of the mustard seed knows somebody in government. The minister can say, hey, it was Calgary Homeless's decision. Right? It just kind of protects them, right? So I'm a big believer in purpose-driven organizations. So we have a very clear purpose, and then we have leadership competencies that I will ask Kay to give you before she leaves.
Okay.
So they were behaviors that everybody in this organization signs up to work in this organization. For example, what one would mean, I'm here to align to purpose. And I commit to that. I believe in a growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which means mistakes are welcome. I believe that if something's not working with you and me, Patrick, and you're my colleague, I commit to talking to you about it rather than talking to somebody else. So that would be a problem for me if people didn't align to the leadership behaviors.
Well, I really, definitely, this has to be a motive for the glory of God.
Yeah.
If you're building the mustard seed and your motive is to be, I'm just a good person doing a job, aren't I wonderful? I would say that's a very bad motive to have. You have to be willing to be a servant to all. Somebody who's willing to say, humble themselves and say, I put myself to the back in order to walk with other people. A reflection of who Christ is. I mean, that's obviously what's going to make a difference in people's lives is meeting Christ and having that opportunity to be transformed in that relationship. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to hundreds of other people that I knew, is that they started that relationship and that made the difference for them as far as their hope, their future, and so forth. And so as a staff in this organization, or even a staff or a volunteer, and it's important that you understand it. It's not just, this isn't a place to go to get a job. If someone comes down here just to get a job and get a paycheck and so forth, they shouldn't be there for long. They should leave fairly quickly because they're not following the right reasons. If they come down there because they want someone to point at them and say, hey, what a good job you've done, and they feel good about that. Say, oh, isn't that lovely? It doesn't work that way. Yeah. You have to have a motive to say, I want to be part of a community. I want to be part of a place that actually walks side by side with people in the same way Christ walks side by side with me. Remember, you're reflecting Christ. And his love, his compassion, his mercy, his opportunity to be able to give people hope. And if that's not something that you're doing on a daily basis, you're probably in the wrong place. And you're going to lead the organization in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
You will just start to lead it just like any other agency in this Western Canada, caring for the poor. I mean, sometimes that's culturally, it's the in thing. Isn't it nice to be able to do these things? And I'm not against that. Good. I'm glad I live in a culture like that. But this has a spiritual intent. And the foundation of Mustard Seed was built upon a spiritual intent, not that gave glory to God. And not something that just said, look at us, we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
How is the Alex financials?
Whoa, Patrick, that's a hard one. We are funded by all 3 levels of government, so federal,
Yeah.
provincial, and municipal. And then that's about 82% of our operating budget. Our operating budget is just around $37 million. And 18% of that is from generous funders and people who are very kind Calgarians who come through our doors and get super excited about what we do and want to be able to help provide and give us more services. And so we get about $5 million from the community every year to help us do our work. And we could not do all of this without the Calgary community.
Okay. Just to add on to that, why do people get so passionate, like, where they want to give in?
I think because they realize that I think it's really tough right now. Groceries are more expensive, gas is more expensive, housing is hard to come by. And I think people see that at the Alex, we've got all those integrated services, and they know that if they can give us some money, they can actually provide more meals. So our community kitchen, I didn't ask the team today, but yesterday we probably fed 250 people. So if somebody gave us a donation of $100, that will feed a number of people. And that's exciting,
Yeah.
right? And so I think people get excited by that. They know that they can't be a doctor here if they're not a doctor, but they sure can help out with money for food.
Yeah.
So we're supported by the provincial government.
Yeah.
They allocate funds and we allocate out. Although as of October 1st, the provincial government's going to allocate themselves, but we're going to do data and training for them. So we principally do data training, quality control. We are funded by the federal government, the Reaching Home, and we are funded by the city of Calgary. And we also are receive quite a few philanthropic funds. So together, the other benefit of a CBO is that we leverage all those 4 pots of funds to ensure that we're aligning with government priorities to serve people in the community.
It's supported through, financial gifts and people just saying that, they'd like to help out. Really cool in the beginning. It was supported by the people that were its membership of its church, the street people of the day. They gave.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just think, oh yeah, they have nothing to give. That is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. We had groups, we had these church services that had hundreds of folks that were not too far away from the streets participating. We had an offering like any other church because it was their church.
Yeah.
And the plate was passed and people gave to their church and they participated in that. That was wonderful. And then as more and more churches got involved, the churches and the individuals in those churches started to give financially to the organization. And then the greater community got involved too. We saw this opportunity to mobilize the church to work with the community in caring for the poor. And so this is another facet that I believe the Lord added to the mustard seed, is how do you get the rest of the community participating as well and learning about what this love and compassion looks like. And so that was taking place as well. And so everything from my next door neighbors to, literally tens of thousands of people and organizations that decided they would give to the organization. And that just went up. When I started, man, there was very little. It was me and some steam pipes in the basement of a church, and that's how things got started. And it was rubbing $2 together, hoping that they would mate and we would make some more. There was those tough days and that thing.
Yeah.
The organization grew financially to a level now that I haven't been there for 12 years as far as the staff goes, but it is far beyond what we never had any idea. We had no idea how God would bless that organization, how he would build the organization. I wasn't a visionary leader that said, it can be this place that works in multiple communities and that has tens of thousands of volunteers and all that sort of thing. I was just like, what's in front of us today? What do we do today? And God will provide for that. And he did. He did provide for that.
What do you believe to be the social and emotional pressures or factors that encourage homelessness?
I think one of the biggest things is poverty, right? And And I look at it specifically the social determinants of health. So there's many factors that we all deal with as individuals that can affect our ability to be successful and participate in community. And some of them is because of racism, the level of education you've got, whether you've got access to food, access to water, access to education. And so because of that, it's a lot of the folks that we serve, they need support at a very difficult time. So for somebody to walk through our doors, you need to be incredibly brave, right? It's admitting to yourself and to others that you need help. And so that's when I look at some of our folks and go, you've got grit, right? You've said to yourself and to others, I need help, I can't do this on my own anymore. And so they walk in here and then what they're asking for is, help me out so that I can help myself and I can get back into community.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that walk down the street and see people who is maybe has their head in a garbage can, who looks like they're under the influence, who looks dangerous, and they will develop a story that's it. That's the only people that are homeless, and that somehow they deserve to be there, that they should just put up their bootstraps, right? So there's so many. So I would say the biggest issue that contributes to homelessness is poverty. When we do the point in time count, so every year on behalf of the federal government, we're required to do a point in time count, which means for one point in time, one day, we count the people that are in our system, that are in our funded agencies, permanent supportive housing. You probably know what that is, given what your family. In our housing services, people who are in shelters, people who are in jails, people who are in hospitals, and then we actually go out on the street and do a street count.
Yeah.
And we ask them, what is the number one reason? And that point in time reports on our website. What is the number one reason you don't have a house? And the primary, most people will say, because I don't have enough money.
Right.
So it leads us to lack of affordable and accessible housing. So in Calgary right now, rent is more than an average month payment for assisted living, right? So you have to have a lot of money to afford to live in Calgary. You just do, right? So for a lot of people, even like some of our staff in shelters who are making $24 an hour, some of them are on the edge of homelessness. And some of them have 2 and 3 jobs. So it's really expensive, right? There's economic changes. So if inflation goes up, that's a problem. There's trauma. So people who are Indigenous are overrepresented. Many as the residential school impact. Early trauma from age 0 to 3. We know that from age 0 to 3 brain development, which you probably were so loved and adored from age 0 to 3, which is why you're at Bishop Carroll right now. Many of the people we serve did not have that same experience.
Yeah.
Right. So I have somebody I have worked with since he was 12, he's now 42, experiencing homelessness, experienced huge sexual abuse from a very young age. Lack of coordination, mental health issues. We have an addiction crisis going on in Alberta and the world, frankly. So there's so many things that impact somebody experiencing homelessness. Many of the people we serve don't have a social safety net. And what I mean by that, like your dad would say, or your grandpa would say, somebody will say, come live with me, right? You will never experience in homelessness because you have this family that will take care of you no matter what. And I give you an example. I have a son who is much older than you. He lives in Edmonton. And when he first moved out, he phoned me because he rented an apartment, Patrick, and he didn't realize that you had to give a month damage deposit. So he had to actually come up with another $1,500. Well, for many of the people we serve, that would mean they would show up in a shelter. For me, he phones his mom who says, can I borrow $1,500? Right? Yeah.
I love the word homeless. And often in this culture, they like to talk about houseless. And they say, oh, people are houseless. We need to provide them a house and it's going to make a difference, like an apartment, a structure, whatever. But what's happened in our society is that people truly became homeless. When I think about what the values of home are, with our family, I mean, we have each other, we support each other. If we have a challenge or anything like that, we're gonna stick with each other throughout a challenge. We love each other. It doesn't matter what happens. We're loyal to each other, and it just, the list goes on and on. That's home. It's nothing to do with structure. Okay, it's nothing to do with the house that we're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
It's to do with our attitude and our relationship with each other. And what happens with homeless people is they lose that. They lose home. They lose opportunity to be able to have that support and network. And it could be for a whole variety of reasons. It could be their choices, someone else's choices, you know, whatever. There's all sorts of blame games that are played about who did what wrong. But at the end of the day, what's missing is that love and care and support that we find in a good, nurturing home environment. And if we need to recreate that for people,
Right.
that opportunity to actually be part of something. You know, I remember one time I said, you know, I'm going to help this guy. I'm going to get him an apartment, and it's going to be wonderful. So he was a guy on the streets for some time, and I says, get him an apartment. So we got some money together. We paid his first month's rent. We were all excited. Off he goes into his apartment, okay, and got him some furniture, did all that sort of thing. And I said, well, that's good. Everything was going to be lovely now. I won't see him in the lineup for food tonight, I'm sure. You know, we even gave him food. 2 days later, guess where he was?
Yeah.
He was in the lineup. Why? He needs community. You know,
Yeah.
you know, life without community, life without family, life without support is actually what causes people to falter more than structure.
Right.
You know, I mean, for a long time we lived with fairly minimal structures in the world. Minimal structures. We don't, that is not what holds us together. And so, what causes homelessness? Homelessness. Not having the values and the activity that are associated with healthy home.
What do you believe are, when homeless, what are some barriers to change or the desire to change?
I think sometimes it's mental health and addiction, so a lot of the folks that we work with have some mental health issues, but a lot of it is because it hasn't been addressed. They've never had the ability or the opportunity to meet with a doctor to address the mental health issues.
Right.
And so when they come in here, they might be dysregulated, they might be emotionally up and down, but then they'll come in here, they'll meet with one of our team members, they'll meet with Clara, who's the dietitian, and they'll be upset because they're hungry.
Yeah.
They're not angry, they're hungry. And so all of us can probably reflect on a time in our lives when we were hungry and we weren't our best self, right?
Yeah.
We were grumpy and miserable and because dinner's not ready, or I skipped lunch, or I ran out the door to school and I should have had breakfast. And so that's many of our folks. So if we can give the opportunity to give them a warm meal, give them a cup of coffee, get them to sit down and visit with people, then we can actually get them back into clinic. We can address their mental health,
Yeah.
or we can address the addiction, or we can address the fact maybe all they're eating is a lot of sugary stuff, but they've got diabetes, right? But they've never been tested, they've never had their blood sugars tested. So now all of a sudden, all the things that they've been eating, because that's all they've been able to get their hands on, it's actually making them worse, right? So then they can come back here and then they can work with our doctors and our team to then figure out what's wrong, how can we support you? And then if it turns out that you do have diabetes and you need to eat differently, we have a dietitian and she can actually help you with that.
Our community has changed in the way that we deal with problems and issues. We now have professionals. Okay, so we'll have, you know, somebody has a breakdown in their family, it's all falling apart. It's what we do now is the professional counselor comes along and they sit down with them and they help them process, and they get their paycheck to do that, and then they go home and they have their own family that they deal with. And then, but that's only been in the last maybe 80 years or so that's been taking place. Before that happened, if you had a problem in your community, in your home, and you had a challenge, let's say your home, a parent dies or something like that. What would happen is all your neighbors would come around And they would knock on the door and they say, we're here for, we have food, we have time. Your pastor would come in, your friends would come around you, and you would come around your family and they would support you. There would be a community support that would actually be a catapult. It wouldn't be the professionals, it would be the people who you would hang out with. They would participate in that. I think that what really creates change in people's lives is not the professional, but it's actually the healthy community around them. Saying we're willing to give what it takes in order to make that happen, and at the same time, that person willing to accept it, and to say, yeah, I'm willing to participate in that nucleus of that community. That's where change really starts to take place in people. For me, the biggest change I've seen happen in people's life is, and I don't even hesitate to say so, is when people finally get their spiritual self in order. No matter what their brokenness is, whatever their challenge is, to realize there's something bigger. There is actually a light at the end of the tunnel, that there's hope in life. When you've been sucked so far down a hole that you don't see any light anymore, it's a horrible place to be. Horrible place to be. And I've been there. And you're down there and you don't see any light, you have no sense that anything is ahead of you. And then some people come along and they say, hey, we're here to care for you. We believe that something could happen good in your life. And you go, really? I don't see that light. But you see it. You see it. I never saw that myself. I never saw hope myself for me until other people started to see it for me. And I realized it was possible. And then slowly I started to see it and go, well, there's light at the end of that tunnel. There's light out there. I can go towards that. That's something that's going to make a difference for me. Eventually I found that light for me, and I believe is really for so many others, is a relationship with Jesus Christ. That changed my life. I all of a sudden had hope, I had purpose, I had a bigger meaning in my life, and I was sure excited to go and share that with others. And it gave me a standard, it gave me roadblocks per se, I guess, more like, it gave me a course, a place to walk. It gave me a journey that I could actually participate in that became worthwhile. And I wanted to change. I didn't want to stay in the same situation anymore. The tours are there through the community, and I had a will. All of a sudden I had a will because that all came together.
So what methods do you believe to be unacceptable or ineffective?
I think the thing for us, it's meeting people where they're at. And so me not assuming that you need help with your diet when you haven't said to me that this is what the problem is. So that would be an unacceptable method. Or me saying to you is, you need to be housed. Maybe you're not ready to be housed yet, right? And so when you meet people where they're at, you listen to their story, you listen to the trauma, you listen to what they've experienced, and then you say to the person, where do you want to start?
Yeah.
What's the most pressing issue? Because we may think that you need counseling, but really you need a roof over your head first, and you need a warm meal, right? So let's get those basics done and then get into the other things that you may need.
So what we know, what Sandra Clarkson, the CEO of DI, would tell you, is we should have done this interview together. She would have loved that. Is that the longer somebody is in a shelter, the sicker they will get. So I don't know if you've ever been to the drop-in. You've been to the mustard seed.
Yeah, I've been to Mustard Seed.
Yeah, so the drop-in's a low barrier shelter, which means these are folks that are really struggling. And shelters are full of people with mental health issues, addictions issues, drug issues. So it's you're probably at Bishop Carroll surrounded by high performing people, right? Which means you'll be high performing. If you were surrounded by a bunch of drug addicts, it might influence you, right?
Right.
So a big focus that Calgary Homeless pushes on is prevention and diversion. And what that means, let's say you're 17.
Yeah.
Say you turn 18, your dad kicks you out, you're on your own, get out of here. You have enough money for a damage deposit, but then you realize you have to have and other months. You show up in the drop-in center. We actually have a prevention worker there who will make sure you never spend a night. So we will give you that $1,800 to keep you out of the shelter system. So the best way to keep people out is to ensure they don't spend very much time in there to begin with.
Right.
That's absolutely. The drop-in center is head and shoulders ahead, and Mustard Seed would be the same, where they're moving toward this concept called housing focused shelter. So the minute you show up in a shelter, you have a worker who creates a housing plan for you. So how do we get you a house, and what supports do you need to thrive in that house? So we're getting very, very focused on ensuring people have a house. The challenge becomes, Patrick, we have 2,000 people on our triage list.
Yeah.
Waiting for housing. And I think that's on our website. So it's what do we do to support these folks during that time? And that gets super challenging, right? So if we had enough housing in Calgary with enough supports, and then we worked upstream to ensure people didn't have early trauma, and we were all coordinated together in a unified fight, and we made sure that all the services were leveraged and people were working together, that would be the best way. And we're trying to do that, but we're a long way from that. Yeah. So there's so much within our scope at Calgary Homeless we can do.
I think that the methods of support are when people give of themselves freely, and so it's not about money. Money's great, it's helpful, it helps make organizations run. If we're not giving them that they're not going to run. But when people actually give of themselves, I'll give you an example. I ran into a guy on an airplane. He says, "What do you we start talking on the airplane." I wanted to read my book, but he wanted to talk. And he found out what I did, and he said, and he's a businessman. He's a very successful businessman. And he says, where should I give my money? He asked me that day. I said, I don't care. And he said, even though I thought I should have said maybe, to the mustard seed. I said, I don't care. And he says, what do you mean you don't care? I says, well, I don't care where you give your money. I care about how you give, period. You're asking me where to give, but I'm going to ask you, what's in front of your face that's worth giving to? And if you're not willing to observe what's in front of you, and make a difference what's in front of you, you're not going to make a difference if you give it across provinces or across cities or whatever it might be. That's not going to change anybody. It's definitely not going to change who you are. So giving has to be an opportunity to respond to what is in front of you. So it doesn't matter if I'm working in the downtown core of Calgary with the most challenged or underprivileged people of our communities, or if I'm meeting my neighbor. Yeah. How do I actually respond on a day-to-day basis to needs that are around me? That is the giving that actually makes a difference. Because if I get that right, and I see that my neighbor has an issue or a challenge, and I'm willing to actually extend myself into that direction to be able to encourage, to challenge, to be a friend, to whatever that takes, my giving and all the rest is going to make it's going to be different too. Mm-hmm. So first things first, how do I respond to what's in front of me? That's my first step in giving. And then from there, if I get that right, the rest of the steps will come into play, come in order. We have a society where our fences have become very, very tall. I know I have fences, 100 years ago where they were called picket fences, right? Yeah. They were like 3 feet tall, and you could see through them and over them, and you knew your neighbor, you knew the kids, you knew all those types of things. But all of a sudden, as times come along, we want higher fences. We want to leave our house in the morning and hit our garage door opener, drive to work, and then when we come home, we hit our garage door opener, we park our car, and we come back in. Except in summer, we cut our lawns, and so we get to meet our neighbors, sort of a deal. We need to knock our fences down. And I don't mean literally fences. I mean just the barriers that stop us from meeting each other and stop us from having community. And social media is a good example. Social media keeps us separate. It doesn't engage people the way, engage people in sound bites sort of a deal. It's a problem. Yeah. How do we engage people? How do we engage with our neighbor in a bigger way? kind of forgot what your question is, but I want to tell you this. That
Yeah.
if we don't engage with each other, if we don't look at what's in front of us and actually see the opportunity to actually make, our society becomes a very sore and ugly society. It's not going to get better, it's going to get sick. We need to engage better.
How involved do you believe individuals outside of the Alex's staff should be involved in supporting the homeless? What should they be doing to help?
I think that there's more awareness now about the homeless population than there ever was. And I think it's because we see it more, we see the prevalence of that, especially if you're in the downtown core of the city of Calgary. I know in my neighborhood, there's quite oftenly homeless individuals in the neighborhood. They might sit outside the Safeway or the Shoppers Drug Mart. And I think we all need to be part of solving this issue together, because the Alex can't just be the only ones, right? So we need all of our community partners to be playing a role. We need our elected officials to play a role, but we also need the community to say, housing is a human right, right? Everybody deserves to have a roof over your head. If you don't like the social disorder that's happening in the city, or you don't like the fact that there's so many opioid deaths, we need to give people a place to call home first, so then we can address those other issues. And that's why it takes people like developers to help create more housing. It needs to be people who have means in which to donate to organizations like mine, so that we can house people, we can feed people, but it is that collective effort. It's not one person, and it's certainly not one organization.
So I would tell you, if you're a Calgary citizen that wants to donate to one of the funded agencies, to us, to the Mustard Seed, it doesn't matter. Go on our website and learn. Get involved, be the Art Smith of the world, right? Take try and understand the complicated and try and be part of the solution. Don't, when you know this, right? And you know this because of the family you come from, that not in my backyard thing is real. And so, and I don't know if you've probably never heard of Gabor Mate. He's a Vancouver psychiatrist who says, and he worked on East Hastings, and Patrick, when I see somebody experiencing homelessness, I say, whatever is in them is in me. So they are people, they're made up with the same DNA. Most of us are mostly water. There, but for the grace of God, I got different opportunities. And if you were born in a different family, you quite likely could be homeless. So understand that these are, our strategic plan says most people start their life in the comfort of a home. Somewhere something went wrong, that the average folk could try and understand what went wrong. What went wrong and how we can be part of a solution. So advocate for affordable housing in the city, and advocate that, even though you live in Mount Royal, people of different ages and stages and socioeconomic status should be able to live there. Advocate for, appropriate supports for people with drug issues. And, Alberta's doing a great job with the recovery-oriented system of care, but that's one tool of many tools, and they know that as well. Understand the impact of residential schools and generational trauma of Indigenous people, and try not to think, well, we said we're sorry, why don't they just get it together? Look under the hood a bit, right?
There's two facts to that, right? It's number one is the willingness of the person to come down, volunteer, participate. I think that's very important. I always wanted people to come and touch. I didn't want them to come and just, give a couple trinkets and leave. I felt if you could come and touch a need and participate in meeting a need, that was going to make the bigger difference in your life. So it wasn't just about what you could do for this group of people. I never wanted people to come down. We're here to go do stuff for these people. Yeah. It was an experience that was equally important for the person giving to actually receive. I've received so much in times of giving. I've received so much when people are giving to me. That's a relationship that needs to happen. So how do you actually participate? And So the willingness to go down there and say, hey, I'm here, I'm willing to do meals, willing to do all these things. And then there's the organization. They have to have a willingness to accept people. And one of the challenges that places like Mustard Seed have is they grow bigger and bigger and bigger and more staff and so forth to be able to do a job. You can hire as many staff as there's jobs to do. But if you're actually willing to actually give the community that chance to be able to participate, it's that is when you truly are making change happen overall in a community. So they have to be willing to say, come on in. It's lovely. We have volunteers on our board of directors. They're really right there. We have volunteers down here that serve meals and hand out clothing. What about all this other area?
Yeah.
Why can't we have volunteers participating in the full range of what our organizations are about, and especially organizations of faith?
Yeah.
That's where God gifts and makes people talented to participate in a whole range of encouragement and challenge and whatever, walking side by side with people. If you think that we just have to hire people to be able to do that job, you're making a serious mistake. That's not a work of the body. That's a work of an institution.
Yeah.
Right? That's a business sort of a deal. And I think that we need to say, no, we need to open up better. We need to see our staff's responsibilities actually to give leadership to community to work together, as opposed to just to say, you can help us with the dirty job on the bottom and the board of directors, but all this stuff in between, we'll do it. You pay us to do that. That's a problem. So I think it's my concept of volunteerism is that is effective in an organization is when we open up the doors and say, come on, we want you to use the talents you have. We want you to walk side by side and be a part of the whole organization.
In scenarios where individuals may not want help, like they don't even come to the Alex, they don't go to the Mustard Seed. What should we do in those cases, or if anything at all?
We just talked about this. I'd mentioned to you that I was just at a reconciliation retreat in Banff, and that was one of the big questions that we posed. What do we do with folks who don't want the help? I think we need to keep offering the help. Today they may not want the help, tomorrow they might, right? So don't pass judgment that that person's not ready. Don't give up on them. Offer them opportunities for help. Maybe this isn't the right place for them to get help. So how can I offer them other places to go and get help?
Okay. Yeah.
I think if somebody doesn't want the support, it's probably because we failed them the first 500 times they asked for support. Usually when someone gets to a point where they don't want support, it's because they tried, and our systems have failed them, and we have failed them because our systems aren't perfect, and sometimes even our systems don't treat people very well. So I think the approach, I'll be honest with you, is we can never give up. So you keep managing, you keep being in relationship, because my experience, and I wish Sandra Clarkson was here, would say most people, once they start trusting you, actually do want support. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I've heard the phrase, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Say that again.
They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, you know what? Put that in your report, my friend. Yeah, and consistently. So the people we serve, and I remember when I used to go to Louise Dean Center, about 40% of the young women at Louise Dean Center were Indigenous. And I remember when I first used to go up and down the hallways, I would look at them and say hello. And they wouldn't even look at me, Patrick, wouldn't. And it was a protection. It's like, I love what Brené Brown says. I'm throwing names at you. You've got to earn the right to hear someone's story, right? And so I think these young women were looking at me like, you have not earned the right. And I've been harmed by people that look like you. Sorry, you are not getting the keys. And some of them would take 6 months, and then all of a sudden they bring up like an invitation to a powwow for me, or or a family dance. But like you said, it takes a long time to show how much you care. And one of my Indigenous mentors said to me, you kind of have to take one for the team and get knocked down a few times Sorry, it is the way it is. Because people have been traumatized, like they deserve. You've got to earn your place with them for sure.
People have the right to make their own decision. I think we try to reflect to say, hey, these are good choices to make. We really want the best way. We believe it's possible. And at the end of the day, the person just said, continuously say, I don't leave people alone. I mean, if they're gonna, you know, first time a person said, I don't want your help, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop saying, hey, come on, I know there could be something better for you. Don't leave them alone in that situation. But eventually, after someone says, no, I don't want it anymore, it's okay. Be warm, be filled, on my merry way. Because the attention that we have needs to be towards those who actually really want to make change happen.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. It's such an honor, as always. But, yeah.
Pretty cool.